Welcome to this week's class in Chassidus. This week we're going to be learning the second Chassidic discourse titled Basi, Ligani, Achoisi Kala. And as we explained last week, that before the previous Rebbe passed away, he had said a Chassidic discourse, a long Chassidic discourse. The Rebbe prepared it for print. 10 chapters were printed before the previous Rebbe passed away, and 10 after, a total of 20 chapters. And a year later, Tafshin Yud Aleph, Yud Shvat, when the Rebbe took on the leadership of the Chabad movement, the way he formally took it on was by the Farbrengen. He said over the Chassidic discourse Basi Ligani, and he gave an in-depth analysis of the first chapter. And every single year he would go into another in-depth analysis to one of the chapters. So 11 years later, in Tafshin Chaf Aleph, the Rebbe did an in-depth analysis to the 11th chapter, which we learned last week. And then 20 years after that, Tafshin Mem Aleph, the Rebbe again did a review of the Chassidic discourse and went into an in-depth analysis of the 11th chapter, obviously different than we learned last week, different than the Rebbe did in the year Tafshin Chaf Aleph. So in the year Tafshin Chaf Aleph, it so happens to be there were 3 Chassidic discourses with in-depth analysis to the Chassidic discourse of the 11th chapter. We did one last week. And this week we're going to be learning the Chassidic discourse, which Rebbe said on Yud Shvat in the year Tafshin Mem Aleph, which is exactly 40 years ago. Now it so happens to be that in Tafshin Mem Aleph, this Chassidic discourse, the Rebbe said during the week, so there's actually a recording, which I was privileged, I was able to hear it several times. So I was able to prepare the Chassidic discourse from hearing the words from the Rebbe himself. Obviously you can listen, it's all over the internet on different Chabad apps. You yourself can listen to it. If you understand Yiddish, that's great. And even if you don't, your soul hears, and it's good to hear the Rebbe's voice. I would recommend to listen to at least a part of it in honor of Yud Shvat. So we're going to go into the Chassidic discourse of Basi Ligani, which again the Rebbe said 40 years ago, Yud Shvat, Tafshin Mem Aleph. So the Chassidic discourse is based on the verse in Shir HaShirim, Song of Songs from King Solomon, where King Solomon says, Basi Ligani, Hashem is saying, I'm coming to my garden, Achoisi Kala, my sister, my bride. And the previous Rebbe brings this verse, and that in reference to the Chassidic discourse that he said that was printed in honor of Yud Shvat, which is the day of the anniversary of his passing. And Rebbe says something very profound, that every single time something takes place, so for example, Yud Shvat, that's when the Chassidic discourse was given out, which is on the verse Basi Ligani. So every Yud Shvat, and especially the Rebbe taught us the Chassidic discourse, the energy of the Chassidic discourse gets revived and revitalized again. And as the Rebbe quotes a verse from the prophets where it says, when a date comes on the calendar which something special happened in the previous year or previous decade, whenever it may be, so the energy gets revived again. So over there, the Rebbe explains, and he says as follows. He brings the Medrash on Shir HaShirim, right there on this verse, and he said, and the Medrash says, the verse says, Basi Ligani, I came to my garden. It should say Basi Ligani, I came to the garden. What do you mean Ligani, to my garden? So the Medrash says, because the reason why it says Ligani, my garden, Ligani, the place where I was originally. Why? Because originally when Hashem created the world, Hashem was fully present here in this world. And unfortunately, when people and generations have done things which caused God to feel like He's not welcome in this world, people were sinning. So the Shekhinah, the God's presence that was felt in a revealed way in the world, started to leave the world until it left up until the 7th heaven. And then what happened afterwards, there were 7 tzaddikim, 7 righteous people. And as we know, the verse says, tzaddikim yirshu aretz, tzaddikim, righteous people, cause us to inherit the land. V'yishkenu la'ad aleh, and we'll be able to dwell in the land forever. What they do is they cause the Shekhinah, Hashem's presence, to be felt in this world. And they were able to draw down the Shekhinah, that the Shekhinah should be felt in this world. And the Rebbe says, for example, it started off with Avram Avinu, that he caused caused the Shekhinah to start descending down into this world, and with the other righteous people, until Moshe Rabbeinu, who was the seventh, and as we know, the seventh is always very, very beloved, and Moshe Rabbeinu was the one that caused that the Shekhinah should literally come down into the earth, into this world, as the verse says, Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai, that Hashem literally descended down to Mount Sinai. Now, Hashem is down here. But what happens, God forbid people sin? Hashem is going to leave again. So in order that the Shekhinah, divine presence, should stay present in this world, so therefore Hashem commanded us in the Torah, the Asuli Migdash, you should make a sanctuary, V'shachanti b'soicham, and then I will dwell in the world. So in other words, Hashem gave us the gift of making a Mishkan. A Mishkan means a physical edifice where Hashem is going to dwell. And the Migdash, Beis HaMikdash, is also called a Mishkan, and this way Hashem will be able to be present in this world. Now, even though it says V'shachanti b'soicham, now b'soicham is plural, which we know it means in every single one of us. Every one of us have the power and the ability that Hashem should reside within us. But nevertheless, we all know it happens through the Mishkan, which is basically called the Migdash. We're in the Mishkan, and in the Migdash, that's where Hashem's presence was felt the strongest. As the verse says, V'yishkenu la'ad aleha, that Hashem's presence will be felt forever on the place of the Beis HaMikdash and the Mishkan. Now, we know that Hashem commanded us to make the Mishkan. So what does that mean, make the Mishkan? So there's a physical Mishkan, but there's also a spiritual Mishkan. And the main component of making the Mishkan, so what does it say in the Torah? So it says clearly, there's different verses about making the Mishkan. So it says you should be a sisas akroshim. You should make those strong posts for the Mishkan, and they should be made out of atzei shitim, posts that are made out of wood, cedar wood. And then they were standing erected straight up on high. And the previous Rebbe explains in the Chassidic discourse, and he says that Hashem told us to make atzei shitim, to use wood, cedar wood. Now that's the literal component, but shitim also comes from the idea of shtus, silliness. In other words, what does that mean? We have to make the Mishkan out of shtus, out of silliness. Why would you make the Mishkan out of silliness? But the answer is because our avodah, the spiritual work that we have, is to make the posts of the Mishkan where Hashem is going to dwell is by taking the shtus, by taking the silliness, and taking the kesher, which also has the same letters as sheker, falsehood, taking the silliness and the falsehood of the world, and to transforming, taking specifically from the silliness, from the falsehood, transforming that into posts where Hashem is going to dwell in. And the Rebbe says specifically, it says, Kroshim oindim, they're standing. And what does that mean, oindim? That they cause the Mishkan to stand. And when we say standing, we don't just mean physically standing. We're talking about standing with strength and without any changes and highs and lows and ups and downs, but consistency, stability, to have stability in our life, the flow of energy from Hashem. What does that mean practically? Or in the words of Chassidus, it's always about avodas ha'adam. Avodas ha'adam means we know we have a spiritual work to do. What does that mean in the level of the spiritual work? Which means to make a dira lo yizbarach b'tachtonim, to make a dwelling place for Hashem down in this world. How do we do that? We do it by maaseh ha'tachtonim, by the work of us down here in this world. And like the Rebbe quotes from the Alter Rebbe in Tanya, where he says, Al yedei maseinu v'avodeseinu, when we do our spiritual work, and we do our avodah, through that we're able to fulfill the will of Hashem. And we all know the will of Hashem was Nis'ave HaKadosh Baruch Hu Liyos Lo Yizbarech Dir B'Taktoinim. Hashem wanted very, very much. He had a desire, and a deep desire, to make a dwelling place for Hashem here in this physical world. Now, so that is the general theme that we have to do, is through the Mishkan to make Hashem's a presence felt in this world. Who does this avodah? Who does this spiritual work of making a dwelling place for Hashem down here in this physical world? So that happens through and with the Jewish people, which are called, we have a name. When we do this work, we are called Sivois Hashem, soldiers in the army of Hashem. And matter of fact, if you look in the Torah, that the Jewish people are called the first time Tzivos Hashem, soldiers in God's army, when we left Egypt. Why? Why is it specifically then? Because when we become soldiers in God's army, that takes us out not only from physical Egypt, but it takes us out from the constraints and the limitations of the physical world. When we stand as Tzivos Hashem, then we're not tied down to the limitations and the constrictions and all the parts of the world that don't allow us to express our relationship with Hashem. That's the avoid of Tzivos Hashem. So now the Rebbe brings from the previous Rebbe, he says that when it comes to tzava, that's our name, a soldier. Well, the translation is, but tzava, the translation the Rebbe says, is three insights to the idea of Tzivos Hashem, the term tzava. One is, as we said, a soldier, literally a soldier, that we're standing ready to do the work of Hashem. Then there's a different component of zman, time, which means in time we're bringing godliness into time and space in the world. And then the third component is tzava, comes from the word of yoifi, which beautiful. And all these three components exist in Tzivos Hashem. And as the soldiers in God's army have the component that we're soldiers, we have the component that we're transforming time, and we have the component that we're creating a beauty. And like the Rebbe says, for example, like literally when it comes to an army, a war, soldiers in a war, that they're willing to give over their life, self-sacrifice for the king, for their officer, and whoever's in charge of them. So that's where you see that the idea of Mesiras Nefesh applies to the idea of Tzivos Hashem. Also, there's another aspect of beauty, because what happens is when all the Jewish people get along, that is the most beautiful thing that exists. That is the greatest beauty. Why is that the greatest beauty? Because we all know it says, and Alter brings down the instruction of Tanya, Ein Dei Yisrael Shavos, that nobody thinks the same way. Everyone thinks uniquely and differently. But the fact that we can have, like the Torah spells out the differences, Roshechem, the heads, Shiftechem of your tribes, until the water carriers, but when everyone is standing together, Lefnei Hashem Elokeichem, all different personalities are willing to get along the way an army stands together united, even though everyone is different. So through that we fulfill our mission in this world, and we fulfill our mission in a complete way. And by fulfilling our mission of being dedicated to God as a soldier, being ready to do whatever Hashem wants, and willing to get along with everybody in this physical world, then we can merit to the idea of Bnei Yisrael Yotzim Biyad Rama. We go out of Egypt. Nothing will stop us. We won't have any limitations. Nothing will hold us back from living a great godly life by doing our job as Tzivos Hashem. The Rebbe says, we know that the Jewish people are called Adam. We're called Adam. One of the reasons why we're called Adam is because Adam comes from the word of Adam, compared. We are compared to Hashem on high. In other words, so because we are called Adam, which means we're compared to Hashem on high. So the Rebbe says, just like in this world, there's something which is called Tzivos Hashem. What does that mean? We are willing to go and self-sacrifice for Hashem. We're willing to get along, even though we don't necessarily agree with one another. So the same thing happens on the Adam on high, which is referring to Hashem. And the Rebbe still quotes from the previous Rebbe from the Chassidic discourse that it says that we're saying that we're Tzivos Hashem in here, in this world, and Hashem is Tzivos Hashem on high. And that's where we find the same name of Tzivos Hashem. The Torah refers to the Bnei Yisrael, we're Tzivos Hashem. But also Hashem's name is Tzvakos, which is a holy name. And it's one of the 7 names which you can't erase. So just like we have the name Tzivos Hashem, Hashem also has the name Tzivos Hashem. And as the Rebbe brings over here from the previous Rebbe, that he brings from the Medrash. The Medrash says, Hashem says, Shmi ata mevakesh, you want to know my name? Lefi ma'aseh nikra. I am known based on my actions. I am who I am, but you want to know, if you want to call me a name, call me based on what I do. And the Medrash says, when I'm going ahead and waging war with Rishayim, with wicked people, you know what I'm called then? I'm called Tzvakos. So you see, just like we have the name Tzivos Hashem, Hashem has the name Tzva'os. When is he called Tzva'os? When he's doing the action of waging war against wicked people. And the Rebbe explains, what's the idea of wicked people? What does it mean someone's wicked? And the Rebbe says like this, because what does wicked mean? Wicked means you're not going in the straight path. There's a straight path, there's the right path, and when you don't go in the straight path, you're considered wicked. Why? So what is the straight path? The Rebbe says something very, very powerful. The straight path is to make this world Ligani, to make this world a garden. What's a garden? A garden is a beautiful place. Sit back, relax, enjoy beautiful flowers, beautiful colors. In the words of Kabbalah, and I'll translate it, it's called a makam shel ta'nוג l'Kadosh Baruch Hu. What is a garden? A place where Hashem says, I'll have ta'nוג, I'll have pleasure. A garden is a place where Hashem wants to have pleasure in this world. As we mentioned before, Hashem says, Nisava Kadosh Baruch Hu liyos lo yisbarach dir b'tachtonim. The reason why Hashem created the world, he had a pleasure. He wanted to have a place of ta'nוג. Now, unfortunately, if you're not creating that place of ta'nוג, so you're considered, so to speak, a rasha. Why? Because Hashem made the world. So you should have a place of ta'nוג, and you're making it the opposite of ta'nוג. And as the verse says, the Rebbe quotes, "V'shamru derech Hashem lasoi tzedakah mishpat." We have to watch the way of Hashem to do tzedakah, righteousness and justice. And those people, unfortunately, that don't follow the path of righteousness are considered rasha because they're doing the opposite. And therefore, Hashem says, "Ani nilcham b'rashayim." I'm going to wage war with these wicked people that are not creating a garden, not creating a place of pleasure, and creating the opposite. How does Hashem do this avodah? He does it through the name tzvakos. So just like we have our spiritual war, to what? Our war in this world is to make God's presence felt. Hashem also has his war. He wants this world to be a place of enjoyment, not a place of chaos and drama and confusion and a lack of peace and happiness. The goal is to have a beautiful, happy place in this world. And the Rebbe continues on. He quotes from the previous Rebbe so far that how does the work a war on high? What does it mean Hashem creates a war on high? And he says, just like a war down here in this world. In other words, like this. And he explains as follows. What happens when you have to go to war? When you have to go to war, what does the king do? You can't just use your day-to-day operation, your day-to-day budget. You have to bring out all the treasures. And you have to actually bring out treasures that you never even used before. You never even shared it. No one even saw it. But when it comes to waging war and winning a war, you're bringing out anything and everything. And what do you do? What do you do with the treasures? You give it to the people that are your foot soldiers, your people that are waging the war for you. So that's what in a physical war. Down here, the king brings out all the treasures, gives it to the soldiers. Hey, go fight and be successful. So the Rebbe said the same thing also. What happens with Hashem? Hashem opens up all the treasures. And Hashem gives all the treasures to the Tzivos Hashem, to the soldiers in God's army. So if we are soldiers in the God's army, doing Hashem's work, making the world a godly place, guess what? Who supplies us with all the ammunition, all the treasures? Hashem does. Every soldier gets unlimited amount of resources to fulfill his mission in the war in this world, to make the world a godly place. Anyone that wages the Melchemes Hashem that's in the Hashem's army, and you're going to be and needs to be successful to do what? To make a dir b'tachtonim. Hashem gives you everything that you need. So now, this is more or less a recap of what the previous Rebbe explained in his initial Chassidic discourse. So now the Rebbe comes and he asks a very, very simple question. He says as follows. We have to understand a simple idea. Look at these treasures. The treasures were never used. They're concealed, they're hidden, no one ever saw them, no one ever used them. And now, all of a sudden, not only are we using them, but we're using them in a way of, and I use the word in Hebrew, bizbuz. You're totally giving it all out. So why would you go ahead and take something that was never used and it's hidden and it's treasures and it's very valuable and you're just totally like squandering it away? What's the logic behind it? So the Rebbe explains as follows. Because when it comes to winning war, that is something which touches the king in his essence. More important than anything and everything in his kingdom. Whatever he has and whatever he does and whatever he's accomplished, when it comes to winning a war, that is something which touches the king in its essence. The proof is very simple. Because when it comes to anything in the king's kingdom, do you see him taking out the treasures? No. But when it comes to winning the war, he takes it all out. Why? Because obviously it touches him in a very, very deep place. That's for the regular king. And the Rebbe says the same thing also applies with Hashem on high. And the Rebbe quotes from the book Shari Oira, and he explains very simple. And he says like this: what does tzvos mean? Hashem is waging war, and he's willing to take out all the treasures. So why is he willing to take out all the treasures? So in this world, we explain, because it touches him in its essence. So in Shefer Shari Oira, he says, we're talking on a Kabbalistic level, because this idea that Hashem is going to war, which is, we use the name tzvos, that's the name of Hashem we use in reference to war. Which Sefirah is it connected to? It's connected to the Sefirah of Netzach. Now, so war, which is same tzvakos, is connected to which Sefirah? The Sefirah of Netzach. The source of Sefirahs HaNetzach is higher than all the Sefirahs. This is from Shari Oira. Now, which is interesting, because just to get a frame of reference, generally speaking, the Sefirahs start either from Keser or from Chachma. So let's even say it starts from Chachma Bina Das, which is the three intellectual. Then you have Netzach Gvur Tiferes, the main emotional. And then you have Netzach Chod Yesod, which is basically the external part of the emotional Sefirahs. In the words of Kabbalah, it's called the Bar Megufa. So Netzach is one of the lower Sefirahs. But guess what? The source, what it says in Shari Oira, is higher than all the Sefirahs. It's higher than Chachma, it's in Keser. We'll soon see later on the Chassidic discourse, the Rebbe explains exactly where it is. But the point is that Netzach is source so high. So Shem Tzedek is connected to Netzach, and Netzach, the source of Netzach, is higher than all the Sefirahs. And based on this, he explains that not only does the king squander all his treasures, but even he's willing to put his life on the line. Now, obviously, if he's willing to put his life on the line, why is he willing to put his life on the line? It's only about Netzach, a low Sefirah. Because obviously, that the Sefirah of Netzach, the component, the spiritual aspect of winning, the Sefirah of Netzach affects the king even more than his revealed life. He's willing to give up his life for it. And again, why? Because the source of Netzach is much higher. And it's so high and so deep that it's deeper and more important than everything of the king's kingdom, and even of the life of the king. So you see again that the idea of tzvakos, where Hashem is going to wage war, is in Netzach. Netzach is sourced very, very high. He's willing to give his life, and that's why it makes sense. He's willing to sacrifice anything for these type of wars, whether it's a king down in this world or it's referring to Hashem. Now, before we go further, I just want to make an important comment and notice as follows. These Hasidic discourses from the Rebbe on Yud Shvat specifically, there's others as well, but we're talking specifically in Yud Shvat, because the Rebbe is taking on the leadership. And it's a leadership of, besides the fact that it's 7 generations of Chabad Rebbeim, starting with the Alter Rebbe down to the Rebbe, and it's also Chassidus started with the Bal Shem Tov. So in the Hasidic discourse, the Rebbe brings in a teaching from every one of the Chabad Rebbeim and the Bal Shem Tov and the Magid. So you're going to see here a teaching from the Bal Shem Tov, the first Chassidic leader, the Magid, the second Chassidic leader, and then starting with the Chabad leaders, the Alter Rebbe, the Mitteler Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, the Rebbe Maharash, the Rebbe Rashab. Obviously, the whole Chassidic discourse is based on the Chassidic discourse of the Rebbe, and obviously the Rebbe has all his own insights, obviously woven into the Chassidic discourse. So you're going to see that we're going to go through, and each one, as we go through it, I'll point it out, because obviously we want to draw in the energy of every one of the Chabad Rebbeim, and obviously the Bal Shem Tov and the Magid. So now the Rebbe is going to explain this whole idea of war, and he says like this: the idea of war is just like spiritually the spiritual level of a desert, which we know, it's brought down in many, many places in Chassidus, that there's a difference between a home that we live in, the city we live in, and the desert. In other words, a home, that's where the light is on. It's a holy place. It's a great place. On the other hand, the desert is void of any spirituality. So over here, the Rebbe brings from the previous Rebbe that brings what the Alter Rebbe says, but in the name of the Bal Shem Tov. So it's really a teaching of the Bal Shem Tov. So starting now first with the first teaching of the Bal Shem Tov, which is a very, very powerful and beautiful teaching of the Bal Shem Tov. I hope you don't mind. I went a little quick before because it's more or less a recap of the previous Chassidic discourse that we learned, and also of the 10 chapters of the Friedrich Rebbe, but this is going to be the highlight, so to speak, of this week's Chassidic discourse. So he brings in the Bal Shem Tov and he says like this. The Bal Shem Tov says on the verse, which we all know, Sama lecha nafshi, that my soul yearns to you, Hashem. Kama lecha bsari, my whole body, my whole flesh is yearning to be with you, Hashem. Be eretz tzia ve'oyef, in a land which is a drought. There's no water. It's dehydrated. Bli moyim, no water. And so, in other words, I'm yearning to be with you. Why? Because there's a drought, there's no water, there's no Torah, there's no mitzvahs, there's no spiritual energy. I'm yearning. In a place where there's no water, you really want water. So the verse says, Kain ba'kodesh chazisicha. I hope to be able to, the literal meaning, I hope to see you in a holy place, in where obviously godliness is felt. So the Bal Shem Tov explains, halavai, I wish ba'kodesh chazisicha. In other words, what does that mean? That I wish that in a holy place, which is referring to in the times of the temple, in the land of Israel. Can you imagine the times of the temple in the land of Israel, which is the opposite of a place where God is not revealed? Eretz Tzia v'Oyev. And it was just like the Bal Shem Tov, just like I yearned to be with you and I wanted to have a connection to you in a place where I was not in Jerusalem, I was not in the Beis Hamikdash. So I had a tremendous yearning. So what happens? You come to Jerusalem, you come to Beis Hamikdash. Why yearn? You have it. So the Bal Shem Tov says, I wish and I hope. Just like when I didn't have it, I wanted it. So the same thing also, when I have it, I should want it with the same way, because we all know something that you don't have, you want. Something by default, if you have it, how can you want it? You have it. So the Bal Shem Tov says, just like something I didn't have, I didn't have you, Hashem. I didn't feel you. And I wanted you. I want that when I do have you, I should want you the same way. So the Bal Shem Tov explains that Eretz Tzia v'Oyev, a land which is basically where Hashem is not felt, the presence of Hashem is not felt. What is that referring to? It's referring to the desert. In a desert, it's not a place where people live. It's not a place where God is felt. And over there, you need to have the Milchama. You need to have the war. So, like the Rebbe start off this chapter, this point that the war is connected to a desert, because in a desert you need to go on war to have a relationship with Hashem, because it's not natural. And like the verse says, Hashem takes you in the desert. Hagadol, big and awesome. There's snakes and scorpions, etc. So what does that mean? That's literally waging war with all the negative forces, the wicked people. And over there, and this is the major point, over there, guess what? In the desert, that's when the tzvakos gets revealed. In Yerushalayim, in the Beis Hamikdash, tzvakos is not revealed. You don't need to wage war. You have that, but Hashem is revealed. But where is the name tzvakos revealed? Specifically in the desert, when it's dark, when the light is not on. So the Bal Shem Tov says, Halavai, I wish, ba'kodesh chazisicha, I should have that revelation that you revealed yourself to me, tzvakos, in the desert, Halavai, I wish that you reveal yourself to me the same way we're in ba'kodesh, in a holy place. And as the Rebbe explains, because what happens is when there's a war, that's when the greatest revelations come out. Why is that? Why is it that when there's a war, the greatest revelations come out? Because that's where in the war, that's the shirish, tzvakos comes from the midas ha-netzach. and Netzach comes out in the place of war. So specifically through the desert, a place where there's a drought, there's no water, then we reach to the level of tzama. We reach out, we're yearning to be with Hashem. Kama, we want to be with Hashem. And we want to have the greatest revelations. And what happens is when we have, and I'll say it in Hebrew or in Aramaic, when we put in our effort, and we yearn and we want that relation with Hashem, we get the tremendous gift from Hashem on high. So what happens then is Hashem gives us tremendous revelations up until Hashem reveals himself, and the essence of the king reveals himself, Hashem reveals, which is even higher, like we said before, than the life of the king. The essence, he's willing to give up his whole life. That means he's giving up not only the revealed life, he's giving up who he is. And based on that, based on this teaching of the Bal Shem Tov, the Rebbe explains that's why. What was his original? Why is he giving up treasures? Because when it comes to, when you touch Netzach, when Svakos is out, when you're in the desert, Hashem is giving it all up, specifically through the challenges of life, specifically through the struggles. That's when you get the greatest revelations, and the ultimate greatest revelation is what? The essence of Hashem. Now, so that was a teaching of the Bal Shem Tov. Now what we're going to have is, the Rebbe is going to explain, Hashem is giving out treasures. So you have to know what the treasure is. What the treasure is. So over here the Rebbe brings in, again we brought the Bal Shem Tov, so now the Rebbe is going to bring from the Magid of Mezrich, a powerful teaching of the Magid of Mezrich, the second Hasidic leader, that's going to explain to us what is the treasure of Hashem. And he says as follows. The Magid says that it's known what is the treasure of the king. What is the treasure of the king? So first he says, what's a treasure? When you say treasure, obviously you're making a statement. It's something very, very precious. Very, very precious. Why? What's the proof it's precious? Because the fact is you're hiding it and you're keeping it in a safe place. So we're dealing with something which is very, very powerful. So the Magid says, obviously, for sure, silver and gold is not the treasure of the king. That you have to hide it somewhere very hidden place. Because what's silver and gold to a king? It means nothing to a king. Silver and gold is that's what the king is. It looks like something. We're talking about the king Hashem. Hashem, silver and gold means anything. That he has to hide it. It's in Hebrew. It's called. It's not Toifas Makom. It doesn't even hold any place by Hashem. To even think about it, it's nothing. It's nothing. Silver and gold. It's something which is very, very simple in Hashem's eyes. So and for sure, he doesn't have to hold it in a treasure. And it doesn't have to be in the treasure of even if it's a treasure, it doesn't have to be the king's treasure. That it's more important than a regular person's safe. In a person's safe, the silver and gold. Hashem's safe, the silver and gold. Hello, Hashem compares to us. So, obviously we're dealing with a treasure. And a treasure of the king of Hashem. Which obviously it's something extremely, extremely special. So if that's the case, what is the treasure of the king? And the Magid of Mezrich says as follows. You know what the treasure of the king is? The treasure of the king is Yira. Awe. That all the countries, all the nations, and all the people in awe of Hashem, that's the treasure of a king. So the real treasure of Hashem is when we are in awe of Hashem. And he quotes the verse that says, Yiras Hashem hi oitzroi. Verse says clearly, you know what the treasure of Hashem is? Yiras Hashem. Awe of Hashem is the treasure of Hashem. Because basically Yira, that's the main treasure of Hashem. And the Magid quotes the verse where it says, Hakol bidei shamayim. Hashem, everything comes from Hashem. Chutz, there's one thing doesn't come from Hashem. Yira shamayim. Whether we're going to be in awe of Hashem, that's not controlled by Hashem. Everything, Hashem created the world, maintains the world. But Yira shamayim, that's up to us. Are we going to recognize Hashem and be in awe of Hashem? That's our avodah. That's our work. And when we're talking about Yiras Hashem, let's be clear. There's something which is called Yiras ha'oinish. You're afraid of punishment. That's not Yiras Hashem. Being afraid of being punished, that's not Yiras Hashem. That's called Yiras ha'oinish. You're afraid of a punishment. Yiras Hashem means you're in awe of Hashem. again, to be clear, it's not in awe of a punishment. That's yiras ha'oinish. Yiras ha'oinish is being afraid of a punishment. Yiras Hashem means you're in awe of Hashem, which in Hebrew it's called yiras haroimimus. You're in awe of the greatness of Hashem. Not only two different worlds, totally different things completely. We're talking about yiras Hashem. You're in awe of Hashem. You're in awe of the greatness of Hashem. And the Zohar quotes the verse that says, "Hein yiras Hashem hi chachma." Now, what is hein? Hein means hein in singular term. What is singular term? Hein is singular, which we know that in the neshama there's 5 levels to neshama: nefesh, ruach, neshama, chai, yechida. Yechida is the highest level. In other words, hein yiras Hashem. That hein referring to yechida, the oneness of Hashem. That is what yiras Hashem is. When you're one with Hashem. In terms of Kabbalah, it's used many times the term yirei ilah. It's the high level of yira. You're totally one with Hashem. Not, God forbid, afraid of something. We just want to be, we're in awe of Hashem, the oneness of Hashem. We want to connect to the ultimate one Hashem. And so, to recap, what is the Magid saying? What is the treasure of Hashem? The treasure of Hashem is yiras Hashem, to be in awe of Hashem. And when Hashem gives out all the treasures, He gives it out to who? The people that are His Anshe Atzava, the people that are in His army, the people that are fighting with Mesiras Nefesh that Hashem should be revealed. Why? Because what does it mean a person's in Hashem's army? What is a soldier? A soldier, practically speaking, is when he knows and he goes to battle, it's a very good chance he's not coming home, which means he's going on self-sacrifice. The same thing also, anyone in Hashem's army, you're going in self-sacrifice. Your goal is that Hashem should be revealed in the world, and you're willing to do anything. And the Rebbe explains that Mesiras Nefesh is all in relation to your yiras Hashem. The greater you're in awe of Hashem, the more Mesiras Nefesh you're going to have, the more of a soldier you're going to be. And again, not, God forbid, to recap, not to be in awe of a punishment, but you're in awe of the greatness of Hashem. How great Hashem is. And you're like embarrassed. Like, hello, Hashem is so great. And that's the ultimate in Yira. The ultimate in Yira is you're in awe of Hashem. And when we go and wage a spiritual war to make godliness felt in this world, in a way of we're willing to sacrifice our life, and knows every one of the people in Hashem's army. So when we do our avodah, which means besarus l'tata, when we do our avodah, we're willing to go to Mesiras Nefesh for Hashem, you know what happens? Isaruso de la'ela. Hashem opens up tremendous treasures from Hashem, and Hashem reveals all the treasures. You know, it's just like in this physical world, when a soldier is fighting for his country, for whoever he's fighting for, so he's willing to go and do whatever he has to, and he gets rewarded. The same thing also, when we do Hashem's work, Hashem rewards us. How does Hashem reward us? The reward is with Yira. And what does the reward come from? Where does it come from? It comes from the midah of tzvakos, which is Netzach. And up to the point where Hashem is willing to totally give up Hashem's life for us, by us doing our part. And the Rebbe says this is what it's brought down. And again, to recap, not to remind you, now that we just learned about, we did the Bal Shem Tov, and we should have the same yearning like we have when we don't have it. The Magid that teaches us of what the treasure is yiras Hashem. And now the Alter Rebbe is going to bring from the Alter Rebbe in Tanya. We're going down to the first Chabad Rebbe in the Alter Rebbe, and the Alter Rebbe brings in Tanya. And it's interesting, the Rebbe brings the Alter Rebbe quote from the Alter Rebbe in Tanya, who brings from the Kisvei the writings of the Arizal. So he's also bringing the Arizal into this Chassidic discourse. Very powerful, holy energy in this Chassidic discourse. From the Arizal in his famous book Eitz Chaim, and he says like this: that the neshama, our neshama, did not come down this world to have a spiritual, beautiful journey in life. That's not the purpose. The neshama did not come down to this world to have a spiritual vacation or a spiritual elevation. It's not the real reason. But the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, based on the Arizal, that we came down to this world to fix this physical world and this coarse materialistic world. What does that mean? To make this physical world a dir b'tachtonim. That's our job in this world. To make this world a dwelling place for Hashem. We're in this physical world, in the coarse materialistic world. Why? Since this world is physical and it's coarse, so in order to make a dwelling place for Hashem down here, you can't just go ahead and, okay, I'm getting up and making a dwelling place down here. Really, there's a lot of opposition. There's a lot of distractions. So you have to actually wage war. What's the war? So the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya. What is the definition of a war? Every single time we practice iskafia, that means every single time we want to wake this Hashem's energy felt in this world, and there's opposition. There's other things we can do. So we have to practice restraint. We're not going there. We're not doing that. We're not engaging in this conversation. We're practicing iskafia. We're not transforming it. We're just practicing iskafia. We're not engaging in other things that are distracting us. Iskafia sitra achra, which means we're resisting from getting involved with something which is not godly or not holy. And through that specifically, it says, Istalik yikara de kuchabrichu. Every time we practice restraint, the presence of Hashem is more felt in this world. Up until the point, that's the first level, iskafia, restraint. And afterwards, after we practice restraint, then we do the avodah of ishapcha. What does ishapcha mean? That's called full transformation. Ishapcha chashoichel nahira. You take darkness and transform it into light. Or merirui lemiska, things that are bitter into something which are sweet, which basically in simple translation means we transform, like we said before when we build a Mishkan, we transform the falsehood of the world to make a keresh, to make another beam for the Mishkan. And by doing that, and by continually practicing iskafia, restraint, ishapcha, transformation, by building another beam for the Mishkan, for the Beis HaMikdash, we make the whole world should be a dira loy yizbarech b'tachtonim, a true dwelling place for Hashem down in this world. So we see clearly what's our goal in this. What's our work in this world? Our work in this world, Alter Rebbe explains our mission statement, our vision, our to-do list for the day is every single day to make a dwelling place for Hashem down in this world. Iskafia, is hapcha, as true soldiers of Hashem. So now the Rebbe is going to introduce. Again, we had the Bal Shem Tov, we had the Magid, we had the Alter Rebbe, we had even from the Arizal, and now the Rebbe is going to introduce the Mitteler Rebbe. So he introduces the Mitteler Rebbe and he says like this. We know there's a verse in the prophets that says, Tzitzkas per zoinoi b'Yisrael. And the Talmud explains, we shouldn't say per zoinoi, but elapizroinoi, and the Talmud explains, what does that mean? That Hashem did a tremendous chesed, kindness for the Jewish people, that He spread us all over the world. We're not just living in one area. We're Jews all over the world. Chabad takes it literally. You have Chabad houses all over the world. So Hashem did a tremendous chesed by putting Chabad houses, Jews, all over the world. And it's explained at length, Rebbe says, in the different discourses from the previous Rebbe, but more importantly, in our case, the Mitteler Rebbe, because now we're introducing a teaching from the Mitteler Rebbe, that he says like this. In the Mitteler has many holy books. One of them is called Torah Chaim on the Torah portion of the week on Parshas B'Shalach, and he says like this: that through the fact that Hashem spread the Jewish people all over the nations of the world, which so the term we use for spreading out is pizron, that he spread us all over the world. So the Mitteler Rebbe says, he connects the word spreading all over the world to the idea of prozois teishev Yerushalayim, that Yerushalayim is going to sit spread out all over. What does that mean? And so how do you connect? Because it says prozos are going to be spread all over the world. So what's the connection with prozos teishev Yerushalayim? So he says, because it says in Chazal, and this is very important, v'hanetzach zebin Yerushalayim. You know that Sefirah that we've been talking about, Netzach, war, waging war? That is building Yerushalayim. So he asks a simple question. Seemingly, what does building Yerushalayim have to do with Netzach? Because it says prozos, Hashem spread out the Jewish people all over, and Prozis Tez Yerushalayim. So you're making a connection. What does Yerushalayim have to do with Netzach? So the Rebbe explains, very simple, based on what we explained before. What is the treasure of the king? That Hashem is, because of he's waging war to make the world a holy place. So he's what did we learn before from the Mitteler Rebbe? What's the treasure of Hashem that he's giving us? He's giving us what? Yira. The treasures of Hashem is Yiras Hashem. So the Rebbe brings from the Talmud in Tosfot, he brings a medrash and he says like this: the name Yerushalayim, where does it come from? So he says very simple, that Yerushalayim is actually made up of two words. There were two people that gave Yerushalayim half of its name, and together you have the whole name of Yerushalayim. Who were the two people? So Tosfos says, Avram Avinu. Avram gave half its name, and Shem, the son of Noach. Shem, the son of Noach, gave it the other half of the name. Avram called Hashem Yira. He called Yerushalayim Yira, and Noach called it Shalom. So Avram called Yerushalayim Yira. Noach called it Shalom. So you take Yira from Avram and Shalom from Shem, the son of Noach, and you have Yerushalayim. That's how we have the name Yerushalayim. So in other words, so what do you see from here? What is Yerushalayim? It's made up of two words. Yira, that Avram called it. Shalom, which Shem, the son of Noach, called it. So you see clearly that Yerushalayim is made up of the word Yira Shalom. Yira, which is awe, which is complete. The completion of Yira. Now, what happens when you have the completion of Yira, when you have true Yiras Hashem? What did we say before? The Rebbe explained, the greater the Yira, the greater the awe you have for Hashem, that's the greater this Mesiras Nefesh you're going to have, self-sacrifice, in a revealed way, in an action way, like the Alter Rebbe explained in Tanya, Isafka in a real down-to-earth. And that, by doing and by living a life of Yiras Hashem in a revealed way, that causes to bring out the tzivois, which referring to Hashem, which is the shirish is Netzach. Now, so by doing our spiritual work in the war as tzivos Hashem, to make a dira b'tachtonim, a dwelling place for Hashem down in this world, we draw down the level of what? Of tzvais of Hashem. And it's like Hashem says, when I'm waging war against wicked people, I'm called tzvais. And when Hashem wages the war, when we wage the war, how do we wage the war? In a way of iskafya, sitra achra, where we basically practice restraint, and we practice the level of ishapcha, true transformation. That's how we get the full avodah. So here you see the connection between Netzach, Zabin Yerushalayim. Now what's the connection between Netzach and Yerushalayim? Because Yerushalayim is the Shleimus HaYira. When we do our avodah of Shleimus HaYira, we cause to bring down Hashem's midah of tzvakos, which is the midah of Netzach. So that is basically a teaching from who? From the Mitteler Rebbe. Now the Rebbe is going to go even a step further and a step deeper and very, very powerful. And he's going to say like this. He's going to bring actually now, again, we did the Bal Shem Tov, we did the Magid, the Alter Rebbe, the Mitteler Rebbe. So we're holding the Tzemach Tzedek. So the Rebbe brings now a very, very powerful teaching in the Tzemach Tzedek, and he says like this, that Netzach comes from a very, very high level. Why? Because you see, how does Netzach come out? When you're waging war against opposition, so you bring out the idea of Netzach. In other words, when does Netzach come out? You don't just bring out Netzach every single day. Chesed is every day. Chochmah is every day. But when does Netzach come out? Netzach comes out when there's a war. And not only does it come out when the war, when Netzach comes out, the king is even willing to give up his own life. The king down here. So the Rebbe says that the Tzemach Tzedek, the same thing also applies with Hashem on high. That the shirish, the source of this Netzach, what Hashem brings when he wages war, the source is in atzmos umhus, in the essence of Hashem. And now there are quotes back again, a thought from the Magid Mizrich that we learned before, that the treasure of Hashem is not silver and gold. What's the treasure of Hashem? What did the Magid say? It's Yiras Hashem. Because that is the essence of the king. What is the king? The king is all about, as we said, it says in the Torah, Soyim Tosim Alecha Melech, and it's explained, Shetahei Mascha Alecha, that we should have awe for Hashem, which is the idea of what? Of Yira. So therefore, what is the completion of Malchus, of the kingdom of Hashem, when there's the completion of awe of Hashem? Which again, we're not talking about again Yira or God forbid for punishment. We're talking being in awe of Hashem himself. Because you're embarrassed of how great Hashem is. And what happens then is, when the Sefirah of Netzach comes out, not only do you don't tolerate opposition, but even more than that, you're actually willing to wage war, and you run the kingdom in a way that the essence of the energy of the king, which is higher than the revealed energy, which Hashem is willing to bring out and totally willing to risk his life for Hashem. So you see again, clearly the Tzemach Tzedek is saying is that Netzach is sourced so deep that it's actually willing to give everything out from the king, which is connected to the idea of what? Of Yiras Hashem. Now, so here the Rebbe asks a very, very simple but powerful question. He says like this. You have to understand. What are we saying? That Hashem is bringing out Midas on Netzach, and he's going to wage war. Hashem, what does Hashem have to do with Netzach, waging war? Where do you have a war? If you have two people that are in a fight, you wage war. But how can you say Hashem is waging war with someone or something? Who can stand up against Hashem? That Hashem has to wage war against the person. And as we're dealing with the king of all the kings, the one that created the world, maintains the world, who can tell Hashem what to do? And not only that, the Rebbe says, even all the negative stuff that exists in the world, it means nothing to Hashem. Hashem is infinite. If someone does behave, doesn't behave, it's nothing to Hashem. So what does that mean? Hashem is waging war against the Rishayim. Hashem, the infinite Hashem, what someone down here misbehaves affects Hashem. How does that work? So the Rebbe brings a very powerful teaching from the Rebbe Maharash. Again, we did the Bal Shem Tov, the Magid, the Alter Rebbe, the Mitteler Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, and now we're going on to the Rebbe Maharash. The Rebbe Maharash says like this, and it's from a Chassidic discourse that the Rebbe Maharash called actually Tzidkas Perzoinoi in the year Tafreish Chavav, a famous Chassidic discourse, and he says like this. He quotes from the prophet Samuel. Prophet Samuel says like this, the famous story when King Shaul sinned against Hashem and he lost his kingdom, and he tore Samuel's garment, and he told him Hashem is taking away your kingdom from you, from King Shaul. And he says, and v'gam Netzach Yisrael lo yishaker, the Netzach, you see again the word Netzach, Nitzachain, the Netzachain of Hashem, of Yisrael lo yishaker, does not lie, but lo yinachem, Hashem does not, you can't go ahead and play tricks him, he's not going to go ahead and renege on what he said. And so the Rebbe says, it says, v'gam Netzach Yisrael, referring to Hashem. Why does it say Netzach Yisrael? V'gam Netzach lo yishaker v'lo yinochem. What's the idea of Netzach Yisrael? It's not Netzach Yisrael. Netzach is referring to Hashem. Why does it say specifically Netzach Yisrael? And here, so Rebbe Maharash says something very, very powerful. The reason why it says Netzach Yisrael is, and this answers the question, because the Netzachain of Hashem, where Hashem is going to wage war against anyone that opposes Hashem, what Hashem stands for is Yisrael for the Jewish people. The Netzachain is because of the Jewish people. And he explains. Because since down here in this world, Hashem charged us with a mission to make the world dir b'tachtonim. So we have to be successful. We have to have Netzachain in our war that we're doing to make the world a great place. And as we learned in the Chassidic discourse, we're called Adam. Why? Because we're Adam Elyon. We're compared to Hashem on high. So therefore, even though Hashem doesn't need Netzachain, nothing really hails in comparison to Hashem. So, but on the other hand, because we need Netzachain, and we're Adam Elyon, so therefore, you have the Netzachain, Netzach Yisrael, the Netzach is for Bnei Yisrael. in the way of lo yishaker v'lo yinochim. And the Rebbe explains it based on what it's explained in many, many places, that this verse, Netzach Yisrael, what is it referring to? So what happened was, King Shaul lost the kingdom. Who took over the kingdom? Who was it given to? Who was it given to? It was given to King David. So Netzach Yisrael is referring to that the kingdom of Bnei Yisrael is going to last forever. Which king is it lasting forever? Shaul lost it. So it's referring to the Malchus, the kingdom of King David. In other words, and the Malchus of King David is going to last forever until Mashiach comes, as we know. Where does King David have the power that his kingdom will last forever? That comes from Netzach Yisrael, of the attribute of Netzach. Because from the attribute of Netzach, lo yinochem, Hashem doesn't change his mind, and lo yishakar, etc. And therefore, because it comes from Netzach, therefore the kingdom will last the kingdom of King David will last forever. Just like the kingdom on high, Hashem lasts forever. The kingdom of King David also lasts forever. Now, this idea that kingdom of King David lasts forever is much more powerful and much greater than the kingdom of Shaul. Now, the Rebbe asks the question, what do you mean? Why is the kingdom of King David much more powerful than the kingdom of King Shaul? We know that Shaul was anointed, and he was actually called in the prophets as Mashiach Hashem. He was called anointed by Hashem. And he was anointed b'Shem and Afar Samoin, like it's explained at length in the Talmud and Tractate Huriyos. So why is it that specifically King David is the one that's going to last forever? And the Rebbe explains, because King David is specifically connected to the Sefirah of Netzach Yisrael. And when you're connected to Netzach Yisrael, that awakens the Netzach on high, and we said when you're dealing with Netzach, it's even deeper than the life of the king. Because when it comes to Netzach, he's willing to give up his life. So the kingdom of King David is Netzach in this world, which is sourced in Netzach on high, which is even deeper than the life of the king himself. Now, why again David? Why specifically does David have this power of Netzach? So the Rebbe explains based on a verse that says as follows. Reference to the end of life of King David, it says, N'um hagever hukam oil, that shahekim, that he stood up, oil comes from yoke. What does that mean? King David's power was that he had oil. What does oil mean? He had Kabbalah oil. Kabbalah oil means he accepted the yoke, which means he's accepting. A very, very powerful and important word in Kabbalah and mysticism and Chassidus. It's talked about for thousands of pages, and it's literally one of the hardest works, spiritual works that we can do in our life, is work on our Kabbalah soil. Kabbalah soil means I'm accepting. And King David, as great as he was, as smart as he was, and as strong as he was, his biggest quality was Kabbalah soil. He was ready to accept. Hashem says, he listens. He understands, he doesn't understand, it makes sense, it appreciates, he doesn't appreciate it. Kabbalah soil. It's one of the biggest gifts you can give yourself. Work on Kabbalah soil. Every ounce of Kabbalah soil will give you the greatest source of happiness and peace and tranquility and the greatest blessings. And you see from King David. King David's power was that why his kingdom will last till Mashiach comes, and from there even further, because he had the power of Kabbalah soil. And therefore, because he had Kabbalah soil, he had an edge, even though Shaul was anointed, he had an edge over Shaul. Why? Because we know Shaul, his source is from Rechovis Hanor, based on a verse in the Torah. Shaul Rechovis Hanor. What is Rechovis Hanor? From the abundance of the flow of the water, is referring to the level of Rechovis Hanor, is referring to the idea of Bina, Havana v'Hasaga, understanding, wisdom, etc. So Shaul's source is where in Havana v'Hasaga, Bina. King David, Kabbalah soil. And even Havana v'Hasaga is great. It's one of the Sefirah. Bina, Chachma, Bina, etc. But guess what? Nothing is more powerful than Kabbalah soil. And King David had Kabbalah soil, which is much higher than Shaul. Rechovis Hanar. The stream is like overflowing. That's amazing. That's great. Nothing compares to Kabbalah soil. And the Rebbe quotes the famous story where, unfortunately, when Shaul botched up when he was told to annihilate the nation of Amalek, so and not to take any spoils and so on and so forth. It's a beautiful story in the prophets, but we're not going to go into it in length. But the Rebbe mentions it here that he went and he brought back spoils. So when the prophet came to him and said to him, "What's this? The noise that I'm hearing," which is the spoils that he took back. So he says, "No." He said, "I brought back sacrifices to Hashem. I'm going to give Hashem a sacrifice." So the prophet told him very, very powerful words. Hine, I'll quote it. The Rebbe says it here. Shamoya, to listen, is better mizevach toiv, than a beautiful, nice sacrifice that you want to bring to me. Lahakshiv, to listen, to pay attention. Meichei levelim, from the fattest, choicest animals. Why? Because unfortunately, Shaul botched up. He thought he was smart. V'choivis hanar. On the other hand, when you just listen and you accept, life is great. Because what happens is, the Rebbe says, when you act and operate from a place of Kabbalah soil, you actually get to draw down from the highest places. What's the highest place referring to? The level of Netzach Yisrael. Lo yishaker v'lo yinochem. In the level of Netzach, there's no falsehood, there's no regret. Everything works out over the top. And that's specifically why the kingdom of King David is the true kingdom. Just like the kingdom on high. So that is obviously a very, very powerful, very, very powerful teaching from the Rebbe Maharash about the idea of the importance of Kabbalah soil. If you want to be a good soldier in God's army, it's important to have the ability to accept, just like King David, that his kingdom lasted forever. Now, we all know in Kabbalah and Chassidus, it's something which is called Ba'avodas Adam. You can learn heavy intellect and meditate, and it's all great. It's very, very important. But it always has to be translated Ba'avodas Adam. How is it going to make you a better person? How are you going to transform yourself? So the Rebbe is going to explain this Ba'avodas Adam in a practical way that we can transform ourselves. And he's actually going to bring down now, we're holding by the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Chabad Rebbe. Again, we did the Bal Shem Tov, the Magid, the Alter Rebbe, the Mitteler Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, the Rebbe Maharash we just did. And now we're going to bring down a very powerful teaching from the Rebbe Rashab. And the Rebbe Rashab says like this. The Rebbe actually quotes from a powerful Chassidic discourse, tremendous Chassidic discourse from the Rebbe Rashab called Tuf Reish Ayin Beis, one of the deepest discourses in mysticism, specifically from the Rebbe Rashab. And he quotes and he says like this, that the Rebbe Rashab explains, and the Rebbe says it's explained many places, but the Rebbe is bringing obviously the Rebbe Rashab to bring in the energy from the Rebbe Rashab. And he says like this, what is Netzach? Netzach, the Rebbe explains, is that you are winning within yourself to do what you don't want to do, which is part of your nature, or to do opposite of your nature. Again, to recap, the Rebbe Rashab says, he's defining what is Netzach ba'avodas Adam, practically speaking, that you're willing to do something which is against your nature. You're going against your nature. It's my nature, this is who I am. So guess what? You know what Netzach is? To go against your nature, or to go the opposite of your nature. In other words, and the Rebbe explains, not only are you willing to do against what you think is right, if obviously you're told it's the wrong thing, or you're willing to go against how you feel, if it's obviously the wrong feelings, or the opposite of anything else, which that's tremendous. To go against the way you think and the way you feel, that's huge. But the Rebbe Rashab is saying, no, that's great. Netzach means not only you're going against the way you think or feel, but you're going against your nature, your true nature, and the nature that Hashem gave you. You have, the person says, listen, I have this instinct. This is the way Hashem made me. I get it. And that's why it's called your nature. But you're willing to go against your nature. Up to the point, the Rebbe says, you're even willing to go, and this is revolutionary, against the nature of your godly soul. So again, there's going against your intellect, going against your emotions, and going against your nature, and going against the nature of your godly soul. That's a real paradigm shift. And the Rebbe says, when you're willing to use Netzach, to go against your nature, and even your nature of your godly soul, that is going out of Egypt. That is breaking any limitation that you have. You literally leave things which is holding you back and locking you into a place of being stuck. You'll be able to unstuck yourself from anything and everything. And even, as we said before, going against the nature of your godly soul, which means you're even able to break out limits, holy limits that you set for yourself. And that is true Mesiras Nefesh. That is real self-sacrifice. And this is the connection why the Bnei Yisrael, when we called Tzivos Hashem, when we left Egypt, why when we left Egypt are we called Tzivos Hashem? Because since we were able to break and leave our limitations of holiness, because we worked on ourselves spiritually on a holy level, because we all know the Jewish people had to do some serious self-sacrifice in the land of Egypt. They had to bring the lamb, which is the idolatry of Egypt, as a sacrifice to God. Through that, through their spiritual work, they caused Yitzias Mitzrayim physically, in a real down-to-earth way. So that is a very, very profound teaching of the Rebbe Rashab. That again, that Netzach is going against your nature and going against your godly nature, and by going against your godly nature in a good way, breaking yourself in a good way, taking yourself out of any limits, you actually cause physical exodus from anything that's holding you back from living a free and happy life. And the Rebbe says this is what Chazal tell us. Hashem had a desire. He had a desire to what? To have a dwelling place. Hashem should be felt and present, literally in the lowest places. Lowest, we don't mean physically, we mean spiritually low. In a place where it's mitzarim, gvulim, that have all these restrictions, all these limits, and Hashem should be totally felt. What does that mean? That the tachtoin, the limits, should be a dwelling place for Hashem for infinity. In other words, we should draw down into the lowest physical constraints and limits of life the greatest, powerful ideas. And like the Alter Rebbe says, we're going to bring now again a teaching from the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe says a powerful idea. Nesava, Kadosh Baruch Hu wanted a dwelling place in this world. Why? And the answer the Alter Rebbe says is, and I'll say it in Yiddish because that's the way it was originally said, and we'll translate it. On something someone has a desire, you don't ask questions on a desire. There's no questions. Why? Because the desire is above questions. It's above questions. It's not in the world of questions, in the whole concept of questions. In the questions and concealments, questions and answers, that's concealments. And this idea of a taiva, which again, a taiva which means above questions, we have to draw that down where? Into the physical world where everyone has questions and answers. Over there should not be any questions and answers. Up until the lowest places should experience that. Just be, just live, just bring God and godliness into your life. How do you do that? B'tachtoinim is how specifically? By specifically doing actions. In the lowest level, because you want to elevate tachtoinim. How do you elevate tachtoinim? Is the world of action. You have to do mitzvahs. And that's the way it's in the general in the world. And Rebbe said the same thing applies in each and every one of us in our lives. That we have to draw down the highest powers into the lowest powers. What does that mean practically? In the Sefirah, if you look, as we mentioned before, Chacham Bina Chabad is the higher ones. Then you have Chagas, Chacham Chesed Word Faris, the emotions. Netzach is from the lowest ones. And in the terms of Kabbalah, Netzach is called Lebar Migufa. It's outside the body. It's outside the body. But on the other hand, in Netzach, which is outside the body, you draw down from the highest places. In other words, because it's the lowest Sefirah, on the lowest tier, Netzach Hoy Yisoid, which is called Levnei V'neihem. It's like, great-grandchildren. But on the other hand, it's connected to the highest ones, Keil Elyon, which is what? The idea of Arachampim, which is part of Keser. In other words, he says like this. Netzach, on one hand, is from the lower spheres. But the source of Netzach, as we said before, is in the highest places. In other words, he said like that. The Netzach, which is from the lower ones, and Netzach, it's really, really one. What is Netzach? Netzach is Atika, which is part of Keser. It's actually the higher part of Keser. Or Moichas Tima, the hidden intellect. So the higher part of Keser, Atik, Moichas Tima, is connected to Netzach. And like the Rebbe says that the Tzemach Tzedek explains this at length. Obviously, in the Likutei Torah, you can go more in depth into the Kabbalistic part. But the Rebbe explains now practically what does it mean in Avodas Adam. We always bring this back to full circle. What does it mean practically in our service of Hashem? Which means very, very simple. That besides the fact that we're able to get out of our intellect way of thinking, which our intellect is also limited, it's a creation of Hashem, our feelings, our revealed attributes that we have, but you take yourself out of the nature that Hashem gave you, higher even, like we said before, higher than your nefesh halakis, higher than your godly soul that Hashem gave you, and you make and you come down specifically into the darkness of the world. And the Rebbe quotes from Eve, Job, that he says, "B'machshakim oishivani." You know where you find Hashem, the deepest Hashem? B'machshakim, in the darkest places where you find Hashem. And when you find Hashem in the deepest places, then it's there's another verse that says, "Meshachareni acharecha narutza," that we run after Hashem. And narutza is plural. What's plural? The godly soul and the animal soul is running after Hashem. And the Rebbe says, and that's why the neshama, think about it, the neshama is part of God. Why did the neshama come down to this world? It left the highest places to come down to this world. Why? To create an elevation. And not only an elevation much higher and greater than what was before. And how do you do that? You do that by creating a dwelling place for Hashem, specifically down in this world, in a place where Basi, Ligani, Hashem was here originally, by making a dear Elohis Baruch with a Tainim. And not only is Hashem felt here in a physical way, but the goal is Hashem should be felt with all Hashem godly energy. And the idea is that God should be felt in Or Yodal Amas. Everyone has your 4 cubits where you live, and how much more so in our house and places where we go, Hashem should be felt everywhere. And the Rebbe finishes off and he says like this: by doing our work, our actions, and our spiritual work in the time of Galus. Now we know that in Galus, there's a lot of maligim. There's a lot of people that make fun and they laugh and the scoffers. But we do our work in Galus by making God felt here in a way that we're not intimidated and we're not sidetracked from all the calculations and all the limitations and all the restrictions. And we're not embarrassed of anything. And we do whatever we have to, and again, to bring it full circle, like we explained before in the Chassidik, from the Mitteler Rebbe, and the Rebbe, from the Magid is rich, in a way of Yirah Shamayim. We're in awe of Hashem. And not only regular, basic Yirah Shamayim, but a high level of awe of Hashem. Yiras Boishes. We're like, wow, we're like so embarrassed, like how great Hashem is. And what happens is the low level of Yirah and the high level of Yirah become one, which is basically completion of Yirah. You want complete. You have all levels of awe of Hashem. And by doing our spiritual work, we will come to build the spiritual Yerushalayim, which is basically Yerushalayim, the complete level of awe, until when we do our spiritual work, what happens is then we'll be able to build the physical Beis Hamikdash, the physical Yerushalayim. Because we know that the main thing in this world is action. We can have all the greatest stuff, but we need to build a Beis Hamikdash in a physical way. Literally, Yerushalayim should be rebuilt. The Beis Hamikdash should be rebuilt. And as we mentioned before, but even the Prazois, Teisev, Yerushalayim should be totally spread out all over the world. And how does that happen? It happens by Tzidkas Perzoinoi, by the charity and the kindness that Hashem did, that He spread us all over the world. And as we exist all over the world, we're fighting the war of Hashem. And we're fighting in a way of the Sefirah of Netzach, which is connected with the name of Tzvokos of Hashem, which actually is connected to the essence of Hashem. And this will draw down the powerful idea of Netzach Yisrael Lo Yishaker V'Lo Yinochem. The Netzach does not lie, and Hashem doesn't regret. And he gave the kingdom to the house of David, to Malchus be David. And David will bring the ultimate and the true redemption and the complete redemption. And this will all happen very, very soon. Very, very quick, in a revealed way. Up until the point, V'nigle kvoid Hashem, the presence of Hashem will be revealed. V'ro kol basar yachtav, and all flesh will see together. V'hoisa l'Hashem hamlucha, and Hashem will be revealed as the ultimate king all over the world. Bimheira v'yameinu mamash, very soon and very quickly, mamash, right now, right here in the physical world. So thanks so much for joining us for our second Basi Ligani class. As you can tell, it's a very, very, very powerful class with a lot of powerful Hasidic teachings, deep Kabbalistic insights, but a lot of powerful practical takeaways. Hopefully you can each take away something that we can work on in our lives, whether it's Kabbalah soil, to just accepting Hashem, or working on our Yiras Hashem, and maybe even, learning more Chassidus will give us the ability to constantly enforce the idea of Yiras Hashem. But most importantly, let's hope and pray that the next class will have all together in Yerushalayim, Ira Kodesh. And as the Rebbe finishes off, Bimheira v'yameinu mamash. Have a great week.